the benefit of it is you either don't pay taxes on the passive gains, or if you don't have enough passive gains, guess what? These passive losses are carried forward into the future indefinitely.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point podcast listeners. Thank you again for joining another episode of the Freedom Point. We're so glad you're here with us today. Really appreciate many of our listeners continuing to jump in and listen to episode after episode. Really appreciate your loyalty there. I have an amazing guest with me today, Alina Trigub. Welcome to the show.
Jeremy, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you spending some time with our listening audience today. I'm just going to provide a little bit of a bio on Alina. Alina is the founder of SAMO Financial and is dedicated to making a positive impact by educating and empowering individuals to build wealth for themselves and their families. Alina is a distinguished speaker. She has presented at prestigious events such as the IMN conference in New York City and the Private Wealth Management Summit. And she's also been recognized in major publications such as Forbes, GoBankingRates, and MSNMoney, amongst others. Alina, you're pretty distinguished here. So would love for you to unpack a little bit more about maybe your personal professional journey and really what you're focused on today.
Thank you, Jeremy. My journey started over 30 years ago when my mom and I immigrated here from what used to be Soviet Union. And I was at the point where I had to choose a career, and I go to college. Essentially, someone told me, hey, you're good with numbers, just go for accounting. And that's pretty much what I went for. Well, it wasn't exactly the right choice. I didn't like taking accounting courses, and I pretty much didn't like my first out of college job, which was with big accounting for a firm, or Ernst Young, doing tax accounting. So I thought maybe it's public, maybe I should try private. I tried private, same experience. So I decided to get out of tax accounting and ended up in information technology, where I had a pretty successful 20 plus year career. And as I was progressing in my career, and so was my husband, the former tax accountant spoke in me, and I was thinking to myself, well, our tax brackets are growing, and so our tax obligations. There must be a way to lower tax implications. And so I was searching for something to help with that, and real estate kept coming up. So at one point, I decided to take a plunge and start investing. After looking for something locally in New Jersey where the numbers never made sense to me, I thought I should invest out of state. And long story short, I ended up finding private equity investments and started investing in syndications as a passive investor. After doing that for a while and sharing that with my colleagues and friends, I realized that most of them have never heard of it. So I thought I need to find a way to impact other people and help them do what I'm doing for my family. And that's how my company, SAMO Financial, was born. So I started helping other people and educating them on this passive way to invest in real estate that allows you to do it without any interruption to your day-to-day life and continue with your career, personal life, hobbies, and so forth. And then once pandemic hit, I was actually ready. I received my pink slip from my cushy IT job at the time, but my husband and I were ready. Why? Because simply I started investing long time ago and prepared us. So I just went into real estate, did some consulting for a while, and then decided to go on my own and just start to buy properties for our family and continue building wealth for our family and continue educating other people on the side. And here we are.
Alina, that's great. So you had some success in the accounting industry, in the IT business. You and your husband wanted to find a way to maybe lessen, your tax burden as your gross income is increasing. Your, tax consequences are also increasing in tandem, and so you found your way over to private equity real estate investing, and you were making those investments, I presume, as a limited partner investor.
Correct.
Was there also a transition over to actively managing a real estate portfolio? So you're effectively doing both in tandem. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, absolutely, Jeremy, and thank you for asking. Yes, at some point I started actively investing, syndicated a deal. I also worked at a private equity as a head of investor relations, working directly with investors. And I think what helped me better understand investors at that time was the mere fact that I was already LP at that point, and I knew how investors were thinking. So I did that for about 2.5 years, but then I realized I really wanted to just buy my own properties and invest on my own, and I switched to this approach about a year and a half ago, and been doing that on my own ever
That's
since.
great. That's great. Well, it's interesting. One point that you brought up is in 2020, and obviously, that was a few years ago, so I don't need to give my condolences anymore. But, you were handed this pink slip, back in 2020. And I would presume, at that time, it wasn't as big of a shock and awe moment for you and your husband, because up until that point, you had been investing as a limited partner investor in some syndications. Maybe you owned at the time some active, single family homes. So you had some cash flow, right, that were coming off of those investments. So that that impact wasn't quite felt as rough or hard as it maybe would have been for someone else. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Jeremy, you're actually right on the money. Because I was doing both for quite some while at that time. I want to say about 4 or 5 years. It was not that impactful. My biggest regret is that pink slip didn't come sooner. That's the only thing. But otherwise, it created a freedom, and it allowed me to do what I always wanted to do, to become entrepreneur and to impact at the local community. I volunteer a lot. I serve on multiple boards. I give my time back to both of my alma mater, to my undergrad and grad degree schools, working with students. And I just spend the days the way I want to spend them. And it's just so much more rewarding, and I'm enjoying it very much.
That's great. Well, there's a couple of things that I want to unpack a little bit further, and that is the types of tax benefits that you were able to realize. I know that oftentimes is one of the big motivations that investors have as to why they invest in real estate, either on the active side or the passive side, and that is because of the tax benefits, right? So I'd like to talk a little bit more about, what you found there when you first got started as a limited partner passive investor. And then I'd like to maybe have you talk a little bit more about, how you were able to select specific sponsors to invest with, and if you have a certain criteria that you use in doing so.
Sure. Both are excellent questions, Jeremy. In terms of the tax benefits, what I learned, and it's probably because of my former tax career and my education as an accountant, is that the investments in these syndications allow you to not only pay taxes at a lower rate, because you're taxed at the capital gain rate, which is capped at 20%, but it also allows you to postpone paying taxes. I don't want to say avoid, because this is not the right word, but you're postponing. Essentially, when you're investing in a project that is a value add project, initially the property either doesn't make any money or makes very little money. And because of that, it's generating losses, which could potentially be enlarged if the sponsor is performing, not themselves, but hiring an engineering team to perform a cost segregation study. Cost segregation study is nothing more than the way to accelerate your depreciation, which is, in layman terms, it allows you to take a larger deduction. So instead of taking a regular standard, let's say straight line depreciation deduction, you're taking a larger chunks in the first few years. Because you've done this cost segregation study that essentially takes the property and breaks it down into pieces where each part of the property is given its own lifetime. So windows and doors have one lifetime, the floor has another lifetime, let's say bathrooms and kitchen that have their own life. So instead of depreciating a property over 25 years or 39 and a half, depending whether it's residential or commercial, you are shortening the time lapse of that depreciation and taking a larger chunk up front. And that creates passive losses, which can only offset passive gains. The benefit of it is you either don't pay taxes on the passive gains, or if you don't have enough passive gains, guess what? These passive losses are carried forward into the future indefinitely. So until the point that you have the passive gains to offset, you have this tax benefit available to you. And guess what? If you're a highly compensated professional in, let's say, 30+% tax bracket, you're not paying taxes on this investment at this time, or even when the point comes that you have to pay taxes, you're paying them at a capped 20% rate. And of course, someone may say, well, how about this recapture tax? Yes, there is a recapture tax, which is also capped at 25%. So yes, there are multiple pieces, and by no means I'm giving tax advice. I'm not even a CPA or accountant anymore. Go to your CPA, because each individual case is very different and needs to be looked at individually. But I'm just giving you some food for thought that you can take home, review, and decide whether this particular type of investment would benefit you and your family in the long run. Because in addition to all these great tax benefits, you would be also either collecting passive income or investing for growth that would allow your investment to appreciate and multiply down the years. Because real estate, at least the type of real estate we're talking about, the buy and hold real estate, is not a make money overnight, make money quick kind of scheme. It's make money slow, but it works for you without you lifting a finger. So if you're a busy professional in your sales career, or have family, or have hobbies that you're very involved with, then by all means continue with that. You can still invest and continue with your day-to-day life without any interruption whatsoever.
Yeah, Alina, that was excellent, and I appreciate you really unpacking, the tax benefits of real estate investing, and I appreciate you pointing out the disclaimer that neither you nor I are CPAs or tax professionals. So really appreciate that. Obviously, seek licensed financial advice, or certainly talk to your CPA about how real estate investing specifically can benefit you as it relates to the depreciation benefits surrounding it. So the next question that I'd like to ask you is kind of, back in the times that you were first really, getting involved as a limited partner passive investor, maybe what were some of the, top list of criteria that you used when evaluating, sponsors that it would make sense to invest into their opportunities?
Another excellent question, Jeremy. And obviously, the more you evaluate deals, the more experience you gain, just like with everything else. And it's a lot easier for me to review the offering memorandums and the private placement memorandums to make a decision, or just go to the operators that I know if I want and need to invest passively. But in general, I've implemented this three-step approach, and the approach dictates basically you always have to start with the jockey. So look at the operator, look at their team, see whether the team members, the partners, have complementary skills, how well they work together, how long they have been working together, how many of them, if any, have gone through the real estate cycles and have that experience, because guess what, sooner or later comes the time, maybe as challenging as now, or maybe even more challenging down the road, where there needs to be someone who knows how to take this time and how to ride the storm and how to ride many more storms down the road. So you want to make sure that the team is experienced. That's number one within the first step. In addition to that, I always have a conversation, kind of unofficial, casual conversation with a partner or partners that operate the deal, to get a sense of who they are personally, what they're about, and get a sense of their transparency and their approach to things. And in general, my personal approach is, I read a lot of psychology books, like Robert Cialdini, for example, and stuff. And I try to get a sense of a person uh, based on how the conversation is going, whether we're able or not to establish the rapport, how fast that rapport is established and stuff like that. How are they answering questions? One of the important questions that I like to ask is, have you ever lost investors' money? And no, I don't want to hear no, never. I actually do not want to hear that. I want them to answer honestly, of course, but I want them to say, yes, I lost, and this was the case. This is what I learned, and this is what I do differently now.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it's a lot more important that the person is transparent, number one, and number two, that they're taking that experience, reflecting on it, and applying it to their business. We're all, you know, whether you're a sponsor, an investor, or other type of entrepreneur, we're all business owners. So being able to learn from your own mistakes is one of the best seminars that you can get. And if the sponsor can do it, you know, they're gold. And this is the sponsor that I want to work with, essentially. So that's number one. Reviewing the operator team and deciding whether it's someone that you're comfortable working with. Obviously, asking for references is possible. Number two is reviewing the market where they're investing, or multiple markets, depending whether you look at particular deal or whether you're just initially talking to the operator and they're telling you, I work with in these three markets, for example. So I look at these markets and I look for population growth, job growth. I look at the major employers. The major employers in the market, someone who is going to be replaced by the next Amazons of the world, or they're going to be there for the next whatever 20 100 years and so forth. So does the market have infrastructure? Is there an airport nearby and stuff like that? So if the market is strong, if it's on a path to progress, or if it's growing, I will consider going to the next and final step, which is actually reviewing the deal. And when reviewing the deal, let's say we'll look at the multifamily, because, you know, depending on the asset class, whether it's storage, flex space, and so forth, there are different things that you look at. Let's say you're reviewing a multifamily. I look at what are the potential rent increases? Are they within that local market range? How is the income and expense breakdown looking? Is it 60-40? Is it 70-30? Is it something else? And then what is the expense progression? Are they jumping from, let's say, 70% expense to 40 immediately? In my estimation, it's not realistic. I mean, I would love for that to happen, but I don't want this to be the estimate. I want this to be the actual, if you know what I mean. So things like that have to be looked at, and among with many others. Of course, I can't list everything in a 30-minute interview, but certain red flags stand out immediately, and they make me not want to go and proceed with the deal. And some of the funniest examples, I'm just going to bring one to you, is I've seen offering memorandums with a typo, and as you can probably tell as well as your listeners, English is not my first language. So I happen to notice things like that. So when I see a word misspelled, it's okay. But if I happen to see the same word misspelled in multiple places, to me, that's a big no. I'm like, I'm not going to proceed with this person. I mean, if you haven't taken the time to clean up your offering memorandum, then how are you going to take care of the project? That, I can't trust an operator like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Elena, this was great. And just to your last point, obviously, if they're not going to have any attention to detail on their pitch deck, then what's to say there's going to be any level of layer or involvement in attention to detail when it comes to the operating business plan? So really appreciate that. For those that are listening to this episode, rewind 5 or 6 minutes, listen to this segment again. Alina just gave a master class, okay, on evaluating operators. I oftentimes say when we evaluate operators, we really kind of look at six different T's, right? And you hit all of them. So we evaluate the team, the amount of time that they've been in business, the track record. You hit on transparency. We talked about territory, or you could call, tertiary market, and then really test. And when I say test, I mean the stress test, right? In terms of the underwriting and the financials. And you're doing all of that on the operator, or as you described, the jockey, even before, you get involved in looking at the pitch deck or the numbers. So really appreciate that, Alina. To kind of maybe take a little bit of a pivot in the conversation here, I'd like to talk a little bit more about your speaking engagement, specifically as a TEDx speaker and someone who has presented at high profile conferences. My question really comes down to this, and that is, what is the key message that you aim to convey to your audience about financial empowerment?
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy. So I've been invited to speak at the TEDx in October of this year. So it's now time to prepare for that. But in general, I'm very passionate about empowering parents to educate their kids financial literacy at home from grade school on. And I don't mean to give extensive lectures on Wall Street versus Main Street, but what I mean is teaching kids by your own example, explaining to kids your own mistakes, and showing them what to do and what not to do based on what you know. Having essentially an open door policy and not calling any question stupid, but exchanging ideas, talking about finances, explaining the finances of your own household, and helping kids to be curious and to learn and go find out more beyond what you as a parent know, because you're only a human being. You can only know so much, including myself. I don't know everything, but I always encourage kids, especially my kids, to learn more and do better than my husband and I did. We do that through dinner table conversations. We do that by playing board games. We're really big on playing board games as much as possible. Yes, we tried cash flow one-on-one. Many people know it's a famous Robert Kiyosaki game. My kids actually didn't like it. Debit and credit could be tedious for some, so we had to put it aside. But one of our favorite games is Rumicube. It's an excellent math and strategy game. So for anyone who wants to engage and improve their strategic thinking, I highly recommend this game. It's good for kids or adults, and also it gives you a great platform to have a casual conversation about literally any topic, because while you're playing, you're engaging. It also gives you a place where hopefully electronics are not going to be present, because just like in any other household, it's challenging to have everyone device free together with full attention, and playing the games kind of allows us to do it and have full attention on all of us.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. And most of my audience know that I have 4 children. I'm a big fan of Cash Flow for Kids, Monopoly, love Rummikub. At the time of this recording, Easter is just around the corner, and our family comes over. And without certainty, we're going to be playing, Rummikub as a game. It's just kind of a family tradition over Easter time frame. So, really appreciate that. And obviously, huge fan of financial education and literacy for kids. After all, they are the future, generation. And, unfortunately, I don't think that our school systems, including our colleges and universities, do an awesome job teaching financial literacy. Certainly there's finance courses and accounting courses and all those different types of courses out there that you can take, but really the personal finance, side, and specifically centered around, investing, is something that you don't oftentimes get, at a university, because they, leave that really up to the financial advisor community. And, certainly most that are in the financial advisor community, they're incentivized and paid a commission, to sell a specific, investment strategy to their investors. But there are other ways, to invest in assets, outside of Wall Street. So really appreciate what you're doing in that space. One big question that I have for you based on this conversation that we've had, which has been wonderful, and that is, how do you personally balance the demands of being a successful business leader with the responsibilities of family life?
Thank you for that question, Jeremy. So I use time blocking extensively when I have a specific project or assignment that needs to be done. I block the time. I put my phone on an air mode, which is do not disturb, essentially, for those that don't have iPhone. I don't know what other phones use. And make sure that I concentrate on the project, do it, and then move on to something else. And then family is always first for me, no matter what. So I always plan my work, my world of entrepreneurship around my family. So family always comes first. And then because I still have a lot of volunteering engagement, I try to fit that in within my entrepreneurship and do both, because I love to give back to the community, and it always feels great, especially when I'm receiving personally thank you from the college students that I'm helping, and then from the local members of the community where I'm helping, being on the economic development board and then on the chamber board, and by serving and volunteering locally as well. So try to manage both, and also leave the time for the family when they're available, which is usually the weekend. So that's a priority as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What's maybe next for Alina in terms of your bucket list, whether it be, personally, and or professionally?
Great question, Jeremy. I will definitely continue with what I'm doing. I actually have a topic for my next TEDx, not announcing it yet, but it's very different from the first topic of financial literacy. And then my goal is to add several commercial real estate projects to my portfolio, such as flex space medical offices. I've been pursuing it for quite some time, and we've been putting a lot of LOIs. So hopefully we'll be able to close on at least a couple of them this year and move forward.
That's great. Well, outside of that, what would be maybe one or two different ways that our listening audience can connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Facebook and through my website, which is samofinancial.com. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. Well, we'll put that link in the show notes. Alina, I really appreciated the time that you've spent with us today.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And listening audience, thank you again for joining another episode of The Freedom Point. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.